You were never told this truth. Because if you knew it, fear would lose its grip on you tonight. What if I told you a simple act shuts down spiritual attacks for a full day? I learned this inside the darkness where curses are crafted and released. This is not religion. This is warfare. And what you are about to hear changes how you protect your life. I did not learn this in church. I learned it where darkness studies patterns, where curses are assigned targets, where spirits track what you consume, when you eat, and how you eat it. In the occult, food is never neutral. It is a gate. It is an agreement. It is an invitation or a barricade. You were taught to fear objects, amulets, symbols, words. But the real battlefield is your body, because your body is the altar. When I was initiated, one rule was repeated without mercy: never attack someone whose spiritual covering has been activated through consecrated intake. That covering did not come from chanting. It did not come from oils. It came from what entered the mouth with intention. There is one food that disrupts curse cycles for 24 hours. Not forever, not magically, but completely for a day. And the kingdom of darkness hates it. Because this food does three things at once. It seals spiritual access, it strengthens spiritual authority, and it confuses monitoring spirits. In occult practice, curses are timed. They are released when the target is weakest, late at night, after emotional exhaustion, after sexual activity, after certain meals. Yes, meals. Because certain foods thin your spiritual defenses, others harden them. This food does the opposite of what curses need. It fortifies the inner man. It aligns the body with obedience. It triggers a defensive response in the spirit realm. The food is bread, but not just any bread. Not casual bread. Not rushed bread. Not indulgent bread. Consecrated bread taken with awareness and submission to God. Darkness understands covenant symbols better than most believers do. Bread represents agreement, provision, covering, sustenance. When taken with faith, bread activates ancient spiritual laws. It declares, I am under provision. I am not exposed. In the occult, we avoided attacking people immediately after they consumed bread prayerfully. Because for 24 hours, resistance increased, manifestations failed, dream attacks were blocked, monitoring spirits returned confused. Why? Because bread, when taken with conscious alignment, speaks in the spirit realm. It says, this life is sustained by God. This body is not available. This house is not empty. Curses require access. They require agreement. They require legal ground. Bread taken with intention shuts those doors. I watched skilled practitioners grow frustrated, repeating rituals, adjusting symbols, reinforcing words. Nothing landed. The report always came back the same: target is sealed. You must understand this. The enemy does not fear noise. The enemy fears order. And bread represents divine order. In scripture, bread was never just food. It was provision in the wilderness. It was presence in the tabernacle. It was identity in covenant meals. Darkness remembers this history. That is why counterfeit rituals also use food. That is why sacrifices involve consumption. That is why spells include ingestion. Because what enters you speaks louder than what is spoken over you. When you eat consecrated bread, something happens. Your inner posture changes. Your authority stabilizes. Your spirit becomes less reactive. Curses need reaction. They need fear. They need emotional openings. But bread calms the soul. It grounds the body. It centers the spirit. For 24 hours, your spiritual frequency changes. That window matters. Most attacks are scheduled within a day. Dream attacks, sudden arguments, unexplained heaviness, recurring thoughts. Bread interrupts the cycle. But hear this clearly. This is not superstition. This is not magic. If you eat without awareness, nothing happens. If you eat in fear, nothing happens. If you eat casually, nothing happens. The power is not in the food alone. It is in the alignment. Bread must be taken with acknowledgement of God as source, not rushed, not distracted, not doubting. That moment becomes a declaration, and declarations reshape the battlefield. I saw people unknowingly protect themselves this way. They never knew why attacks failed. They just felt covered for a day. Darkness knew. We marked them as temporarily sealed. This is why some of you feel sudden peace after certain meals, why anxiety lifts, why dreams quiet down. It was not coincidence, it was coverage. But coverage expires if you live carelessly, if you reopen doors, if you surrender authority through fear or sin. That is why the window is 24 hours. God teaches discipline through cycles. This food is not a replacement for obedience. It is reinforcement for it. When you combine consecrated intake with righteous living, curses collapse faster. You were never meant to be constantly defending. You were meant to be positioned. Bread positions you, and darkness respects position. This is why fasting often ends with bread. This is why communion uses bread. This is why Jesus broke bread before authority was displayed. There are layers you were never taught, but now you know one. The enemy does not want you grounded. He wants you frantic, disconnected, reactive. Bread stabilizes you, and a stable believer is difficult to touch. This is only the beginning. You were told the enemy listens to your words. That is true, but what you were not told is this. Darkness watches your habits even more closely. In the occult, we studied patterns, not passion. We did not fear loud prayers. We feared consistent alignment. And one of the strongest indicators of alignment was eating behavior, because eating reveals authority. Who you acknowledge as your source determines who has access to you. That is why the enemy studies when you eat, why you eat, how you eat, and what state your soul is in when you do. Most believers eat unconsciously, distracted, complaining, scrolling, rushing. That creates vulnerability, not because the food is evil, but because the moment is empty. Empty moments invite intrusion. In spiritual warfare, emptiness is dangerous. An empty house gets visited. This is why curses are often released after exhaustion, after grief, after fasting with bitterness, after meals eaten in anger. Those moments open spiritual seams, but consecrated eating seals them. Darkness understands that food is agreement. It always has. That is why false religions emphasize ritual meals. That is why witchcraft uses ingestion. That is why covenants involve consumption. Because consumption says, I accept this as sustaining. When you eat without gratitude, you unknowingly say, I sustain myself. That weakens authority. But when you eat acknowledging God, you declare dependence. And dependence on God terrifies darkness. Because dependent people are covered people. This is why bread taken with awareness disrupts curse deployment. Monitoring spirits rely on predictable access windows. Late night hours, emotional crashes, moments after indulgence, moments after isolation. But when bread is eaten as alignment, the window closes. I watched curses fail because the timing was wrong. The target was grounded, centered, spiritually present, and presence repels intrusion. Darkness does not overpower authority. It looks for absence of it. That is why the enemy distracts you before meals. Noise, urgency, anxiety. Because distracted eating weakens alignment, but intentional eating restores it. This is not about ritual. It is about awareness. Awareness brings responsibility. Responsibility brings authority. And authority shuts down access. In the occult, we could sense it. A shift after certain people ate. A resistance in the atmosphere around them. Dream attacks would bounce. Thought injections would fail. Emotional triggers would not stick. We called it temporary fortification. It did not mean the person was perfect. It meant they were present. Presence matters. Most curses do not work through power. They work through timing. They wait until you are disconnected from yourself. But consecrated bread reconnects you. It grounds the soul. It stabilizes emotion. It quiets mental chaos. And chaos is the enemy's favorite entry point. When chaos is gone, manipulation fails. This is why some of you feel attacked when you skip meals. Why irritability increases. Why thoughts become heavier. Hunger affects the soul more than you were taught, and darkness exploits it. But bread eaten with acknowledgement restores equilibrium. You must understand this truth. The enemy does not want you weak. He wants you unstable. Instability creates permission. Stability removes it. This is why Jesus ate before confronting power. This is why provision came before instruction. This is why bread appears before breakthroughs. Darkness mirrors divine order because it knows it works. That is why curses mimic structure. Why spells have timing. Why rituals follow cycles. But divine alignment overrides counterfeit order. When you eat with intention, you realign. And alignment changes jurisdiction. For 24 hours, jurisdiction shifts. Your atmosphere becomes less accessible. Your mind becomes less suggestible. And suggestibility is how curses land. Most attacks begin as thoughts, as moods, as sudden heaviness. But grounded minds reject intrusion. Bread grounds you. This is not accidental. This is ancient. You were never meant to be careless with sustenance. You were meant to steward it. Food was always spiritual. Modern life numbed you to that truth. But darkness never forgot. That is why it studies your consumption patterns. Now you know why. And now you can interrupt the cycle. This is not about fear. It is about mastery. You are not a target when you are aligned. You are a territory. And territories are defended. Most people think protection is constant. It is not. Protection is maintained. In the occult, we never assumed access was permanent. We waited for lapses. We watched for cracks. We tracked when authority weakened. And one of the clearest indicators was time. Protection moves in windows. That is why attacks repeat in cycles. That is why certain days feel heavier. That is why breakthroughs are followed by resistance. Because authority must be sustained. When consecrated bread is taken with alignment, something activates. Not a charm, not a spell, a jurisdictional shift. For 24 hours, your spiritual posture changes. You are not more powerful. You are more positioned. And position determines access. Darkness cannot violate jurisdiction without consequence. It looks for moments when jurisdiction expires. That is why careless living matters. That is why emotional indulgence matters. That is why compromise matters. Because compromise shortens the window. I watched protection collapse early when people reopened doors. Through fear, through rage, through lust, through agreement with lies. The food did its work, but the person surrendered ground. This is why some of you feel covered in the morning and exposed by night. Not because God left, because alignment drifted. Curses need permission. They cannot force entry. But permission is often emotional, not intentional. A single moment of despair can undo hours of grounding. A single agreement with hopelessness can thin the wall. Darkness listens closely to what you agree with after you eat. Because eating with alignment establishes authority, but agreement sustains it. This is why attacks often come through thoughts. You are still stuck. Nothing changed. This won't last. Those thoughts are probes. If you agree, access opens. If you resist, the window holds. This is warfare you were never trained for. You were taught to react, not to maintain. But maintenance is power. The 24-hour window is not passive. It must be guarded, not with anxiety, with awareness. Awareness keeps authority active. This is why silence matters after alignment, why rushing back into chaos weakens coverage, why peace is strategic. Peace is not softness. Peace is discipline. Darkness feeds on agitation. When you are calm, it struggles to attach. This is why consecrated bread works. It brings the soul into order. Order is hostile to chaos-based entities. But order must be protected. I saw people unknowingly sabotage their protection. They ate with gratitude, then immediately returned to fear, to complaining, to self-hatred. The jurisdiction shifted back. Not because the food failed, because authority was surrendered. This is why some believers feel betrayed by methods. They say, I tried it and nothing happened. Something did happen, but you did not hold it. Authority is not fragile, but it is respected. If you disrespect it, it withdraws. God does not force covering on the careless. This is why obedience matters, not perfection. Alignment. You do not need to be flawless. You need to be intentional. When you eat consecrated bread, you are making a statement. But the statement must be consistent with your posture. If your mouth declares dependence, but your heart declares fear, the declaration weakens. Darkness exploits inconsistency. That is why integrity matters in warfare, not morality theater. Internal coherence. When your inner world agrees with your actions, your authority stabilizes. And stabilized authority repels intrusion. This is why some people live relatively untouched without knowing why. They are consistent. Consistency confuses darkness because darkness expects reaction. When reaction does not come, it withdraws. I watched curses lose momentum simply because the target did not spiral, did not panic, did not chase the attack. They stayed grounded. Grounded people are difficult to manipulate. This is why fasting without wisdom can backfire, because hunger without grounding creates instability. But bread after alignment restores balance. Balance matters. Extremes create openings. The enemy does not need you sinful. He needs you unstable. But bread stabilizes. For 24 hours, you are more resistant to emotional hijacking, less reactive to triggers, less open to suggestion. That is the window. That is why it matters. And that is why the enemy tries to rush you back into noise. Urgency is a tactic. Do something now, fix this now, react now. But authority is not rushed. Authority is held. When you slow down after alignment, you extend the effect, not magically, practically. You make it harder for access points to open. This is warfare at a level most never reach. Because it requires self-governance. You cannot outsource this. No pastor can eat for you. No prayer partner can maintain your posture. This is personal stewardship. That is why it works. Darkness respects personal authority more than borrowed faith. When you govern yourself, you are dangerous. This is why the protection is temporary, not to limit you, but to train you. God teaches you how to hold ground. Once you learn to hold ground, you no longer fear attacks. You recognize them, and recognition weakens them. This knowledge shifts you from victim to watchman. And watchmen are not easily surprised. You are learning how the battlefield actually works, and there is more. Knowledge without application is exposure. Darkness is not threatened by what you hear. It is threatened by what you hold. This final truth is where most people fail. They learn the secret. They feel empowered for a moment. Then they return to passive living. Passive people are easy to access. Authority is not loud. It is established. When I say curses fail, I am not saying attacks stop. I am saying they stop landing. That distinction matters. You will still feel pressure. You will still sense resistance, but it will not root, because rooted authority repels attachment. This is where consecrated bread becomes more than a moment. It becomes a training tool. Each time you eat with awareness, you practice governance. You are telling your body who leads. You are telling your soul what it answers to. You are telling the spirit realm where jurisdiction lies. Darkness listens, not to your words alone, to your consistency. This is why some people are attacked relentlessly and others are left alone. Not because one is more spiritual, because one is more regulated. Regulated souls are dangerous. Emotional regulation shuts down manipulation. Mental regulation blocks suggestion. Spiritual regulation collapses access. Bread helps initiate that regulation, but you must walk it out. You do not chase feelings. You do not scan for attacks. You do not obsess over protection. Obsession creates fear. Fear opens doors. Authority rests. This is why mature believers appear unbothered. They are not ignorant. They are grounded. Grounded people do not react quickly. They observe. Observation frustrates darkness, because darkness feeds on impulse. When you slow down, you remove fuel. This is why after alignment, you must guard your reactions, not your environment, your reactions. Most curses fail or succeed based on reaction. Fear amplifies intrusion. Calm starves it. This is why Jesus slept during storms, not because storms were fake, but because authority was settled. Settled authority does not rush. This is how you walk unreachable, not hiding, not retreating, but governing. You eat with gratitude. You move with awareness. You speak deliberately. You rest intentionally. Rest is warfare. Exhausted people are suggestible. Rested people are discerning. This is why darkness pushes burnout, overthinking, spiritual paranoia. Paranoia is not discernment. It is fear dressed as wisdom. True discernment is calm, and calm blocks access. When you understand this, you stop giving the enemy free leverage. You stop narrating attacks. You stop magnifying resistance. You stop rehearsing fear, because rehearsal strengthens pathways. Instead, you hold position. Position does not need constant reinforcement. It needs consistency. This is why the protection window exists, not to make you dependent, but to teach you rhythm. Eat, align, hold, repeat. Over time, the windows overlap. Not because the food became stronger, because you did. You learned how to maintain alignment beyond the moment. That is when curses stop being a concern. Not because they disappeared, but because you outgrew their reach. Darkness does not waste resources on fortified territory. It looks for easier access. When you become regulated, you become expensive to attack. And darkness is economical. This is why some of you feel attacks lessen over time. Not because you are lucky, because you stopped reacting. Reaction is agreement. Non-reaction is resistance. This is not denial. This is authority. You acknowledge pressure without surrendering posture. That is mastery. This is what ex-occultists fear most. Not loud believers. Governed believers. Because governed believers cannot be steered. They are not pulled by emotion. They are not driven by fear. They are not distracted by noise. They eat. They align. They walk. And the battlefield adjusts around them. This is how you become unreachable, not invisible, untouchable. Because authority does not need to be defended. It needs to be inhabited. And once you inhabit it, darkness has no choice but to withdraw. This is the level you were meant to live at. Not surviving attacks. Outgrowing them. Now you know you are not exposed. You are not powerless. You have been living below your authority. Now you know how to stand in it. Hold your ground. Guard your alignment. Walk without fear. What once attacked you will now avoid you. This is victory, and it begins now.